Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'd like to discuss with you the oldest unsolved case in Los Angeles. This case takes place in Mid-Wilshire, a neighborhood in central Los Angeles. 22-year-old Wendy Jo Halison was an art student in her senior year at San Fernando Valley State College, known today as Cal State Northridge. Wendy had planned on going on a shopping trip to buy a hairdryer one Sunday afternoon in 1968. Before heading out, Wendy made a call to her sister Linda, asking her if she wanted to go buy a hairdryer with her, that she saw was on sale in the newspaper. Linda, having two young sons at home, wanted to spend the day with her family and declined Wendy's invitation. That would be the last time she ever spoke to her sister, because later that day, her family began to worry when she didn't check in with them. Wendy drove her green Thunderbird down Wilshire Boulevard and filled up her car at a gas station down the street from Thrifty, which is a popular drugstore from the 1960s, and she wasn't heard from after. That night, her family called the police to report her missing, something the police told the family was too soon to make into a missing persons case. Without waiting, the family began searching for Wendy. Fortunately, Linda's boyfriend Gil, a private investigator, had friends help them search as well. The next morning, he hired a helicopter to search around the neighborhood from above, and within the hour of searching, Wendy's boyfriend had spotted her green Thunderbird parked along Fairfax Avenue. Gil approached the location, found Wendy's keys on the back seat floor, and her body in the trunk of her own car. LAPD investigated Wendy's death and concluded that she had been sexually assaulted and then strangled. But what exactly was the motive? Detectives noted she still wore her jewelry and watch, which ruled out robbery as a motive. The rope she was strangled with was found at the scene and her fingernails were broken, a sign of resistance against her attacker. They say it's likely people know their murderer, and detectives quickly looked into the four men who knew Wendy well. As suspects, her boyfriend, an ex, her brother-in-law, Gil, and another male friend. The boyfriend stood out to investigators in particular. How was Wendy's boyfriend able to find her car so quickly? Even the pilot of the search helicopter remarked at how it was nearly impossible to see the car from where they were flying. Even more suspiciously, he also failed the lie detector test. Meanwhile, Gil offered to take a polygraph right away in order to eliminate himself as a suspect and catch the person responsible. However, years would end up going by without much progress being made. The only clue detectives were able to gather were two reports of a white man seen near Wendy at the store and again at the gas station. Without any more leads, the case went cold for many years. At the turn of the 21st century, breakthroughs in DNA analysis were beginning to form, and evidence from Wendy's case was analyzed, only to find that the sample of the suspect's semen was found on her clothing. The four original men questioned about Wendy's death had their blood drawn, but all four were eliminated as suspects. The case went cold yet again, as the forensic evidence collected was too small to be tested against the collections in state and national databases. Over the years, Wendy's death and not knowing who murdered her continued to greatly distress her family, especially her father Lee, whom she shared a birthday with. Wendy's room in her family home remained untouched, and Gil avoided driving down Fairfax. Lee visited the police station regularly, asking for new leads, and offered rewards for anyone who had seen Wendy that day. As Lee grew older, he also urged Linda not to forget about her sister, and to do whatever she could to find out who took away his daughter. 3 different detectives had been working on Wendy's case for years by 2016, and only one, Richard, was one of 8 original detectives assigned to the cold case unit in 2001. It was routine to look over old cold cases for new clues and rerun DNA, now that technology had vastly improved, only this time, they found a match. Edwin Richardson was a lifelong criminal whose record began in childhood and happened across the country. He moved from state to state, working odd jobs to sustain himself, but in 1960, he attempted a robbery and kidnapping in San Diego that earned him 8 years in prison. Tragically, he gained parole in April 1968, just 5 months before Wendy was murdered. A violent repeat offender, Edwin was convicted of killing 21-year-old Joe Burrow in Ohio and the kidnapping of 2 girls in West Virginia. Although he was convicted, Edwin ran away for 3 years until he was caught again in Arizona. While being transported back to Ohio, he claimed to have killed another woman, covered her in a blanket, and tossed her over a cliff. Some 20 years later, police had used DNA to link Edwin to the murder of 23-year-old Maria Jean Hires in 1972. Her body was found on an embankment, wrapped in cloth clothes, to Yorba Linda Country Club. Just as he claimed, Edwin, who was 70 at the time and on an oxygen tank from emphysema, pleaded guilty to Marla's murder and was sentenced to life in prison in 2006. By the time DNA results identifying Edwin as Wendy's killer came back, he had been dead for about 4 years. Because Edwin was dead, investigators couldn't use his sample to match the initial DNA evidence. Instead, a blood sample of Edwin's, found at the scene of Marla's murder, matched the blood collected from Wendy's case. Detectives examined Edwin's modus operandi and noted the similarities within his victims. All were young women, brunettes, and were alone when abducted. All had abandoned cars and were assaulted, then strangled. Edwin was a serial killer, but detectives noted that most serial killers didn't have gaps between killings, leading them to believe there were other victims whose cases had gone cold. In 1962, a 22-year-old Marjorie Shute, who worked as an executive secretary at WaterBearStudios, was murdered a year after Wendy in a similar manner and was found dead in Burbank. Her car, however, was found in the same parking lot as the thrifty drugstore where Wendy shopped at. Although detectives are sure Edwin murdered her too, evidence from Marjie's case was lost. After 48 years, detectives could finally tell Linda who was responsible for her sister's murder. In LAPD's downtown headquarters, Linda took her sister's belongings home, 2 cardboard boxes containing items from Wendy's car, school papers, letters, and her driver's license.